And here we are, another spoiler room, a Monday night. This past weekend, a horror film, an indie horror film, made the jump from the festival scene to the big screen, and it was called It Follows. And tonight in the spoiler room crew, I have a group of individuals who have joined me to talk about this interesting twist of events for this little indie horror film. We have tonight in here first, Mr. Cole Meredith. Hello, sir.
Hello, Mark. Thanks for having me, man.
Glad you can make it here, even with you being under the weather. We appreciate you being in the room. And, of course, we have Mr. Gonzorific himself, the lovely Andrew Shearer.
Man, thanks for letting me be lovely on Monday night, Mark.
You bet, Andrew. And last, but definitely not least, he is here once again, Mr. Scott Davis. Hello, sir.
Hello, I'm freshly showered and ready to go. Let's go.
Awesome. Oh, we didn't catch you while you're soapy. Oh, well.
Well, I'm always freshly showered. I'm a very clean person. I'm kind of like the granddad in Hard Day's Night.
Oh, so, speaking of hard and a night, we're talking It Follows, the story of a woman named, well, a girl, college girl, I guess, never really established. We'll talk about that in a minute. Named Jay, who's enamored, who really likes this guy, and they end up getting busy in the back seat of his car. And the minute they're done and they're enjoying the bliss, he goes, "Oh yeah, by the way, I'm cursed. You're going to have some evil force follow you to try to kill you, and then after it kills you, it's going to try to come after me, so you best go have sex with someone so it goes after that person instead of you." And she's like, "What?" And sure enough, there's an evil force coming, and so she spends the rest of the film on the run trying to figure out how she can shed this evil force and trying multiple different ways for it to come to a very drastic, climactic ending.
If the trailers were with your approach, your summation of that, I think there would have been a needle scratch somewhere in the trailer. And now you're Kirsten gonna have to have sex.
What? So It Follows, gentlemen. There's many things going on with this film, and it's very divided because I want to start first by just saying that it surprises me that this film actually got wide release, in all honesty, because even for a indie film going modern, this one is definitely all indie. Wouldn't you say, Andrew, that this film is unlike some other indie releases that have some maybe mass market appeal? This one really is all indie.
Yeah, I think what I put on Twitter after I saw it was, "This movie's so good, I can't believe it's in a multiplex."
Yeah, I mean, it just surprised me. Scott, did it surprise you that a film like this actually jumped the festival scene and got to widescreen release rather than, say, a direct-to-video distribution?
Well, it's hard to say these days because it's hard to tell what that's going to happen with. But I get what you're saying. Yeah, definitely it had. Oh man, it had a very indie feel, and there were not, unfortunately, a lot of people in the theater where I saw it, which was at the local mall. As Andrew said, what are the chances? But when I saw it, I'm like, whoa, yeah, okay, this is really arty. It's okay, it takes a slow pace. It's lots of tracking shots, lots of shots of close-up shots of nature and everything. Like, for instance, there's that lots of people just talking about things from their childhood and everything like that. Like, okay, yeah, it's definitely not your slam bang look for the money shot to put in the trailer horror film. I will say that, definitely.
Yeah. What about you, Cole? Surprise you that it made it to the theater?
Yeah, I mean, it does. The content itself, I think there's a lot of good arty horror movies out there right now. In Fear comes to mind.
Mm-hmm.
If anybody out there has not seen In Fear, I highly recommend it as a teen horror movie that pushes the boundaries. But in terms of wide release, I think, yeah, it's surprising. Then again, I was surprised that You're Next got that kind of release too.
Well,
which These two movies, I don't think they're alike.
Yeah.
But I do think they have a very similar, I don't want to say mentality either, but I just thought of the two movies together, especially tonight. Before I came onto the show, I was just thinking about them together. I think this is probably the more unique of the two movies, but also maybe the more gimmicky of the two, although I will say it's definitely a unique film. Artie in the best way. I mean, not Artie like Wolf Creek Artie, but Artie like this is what I'm kind of getting pissed off about all the Nightmare on Elm Street references. But and it's not just Andrew. I don't want to. Andrew, I don't want him to think I'm. This is what reviewers bring up, and some people even mentioning The Shining, which blows me away. I can't see that. But I will say it does remind me of the first Nightmare on Elm Street in terms of being arty, in terms of really having significant cinematography that stays with you, the way art house films stay with you. The answer is yeah, definitely, man.
Well, for me, a lot of people have said that. For me, it had more of a vibe, a Halloween vibe.
Yeah.
Almost, rather than Nightmare on Elm Street or the others, the Halloween vibe, because you had the sparse soundtrack, you had those tracking shots. One in particular that got me, because what stood out for me right away, before anything else, was the cinematography for this horror film. Regardless of whether or not you really like the content or whatnot, you got to admit, visually, what they do with the camera in that is stuff you do not see in wide-release Hollywood horror films.
Absolutely.
I mean, You're Next, I kind of see how that could have got wide release because it has more of a slasher feel, the home invasion type of thing. Yeah. Whereas this, I rank this up there. I don't know if any of you have seen Pieces of Talent.
Yeah, I've seen that.
I've been meaning to watch it. I have not.
I would say this is a little bit along that veins as far as its pacing and how things are unveiled, the slower pace to it, which again is one of the things that surprised me. I didn't want to sound like a douche, but and let me know if you guys agree, but all of us here have watched many indie horror films, the lower budget festival type of indie horror films. We've been watching this type of film for a while. So when I went to see It Follows, a lot of people were just, a lot of people were praising it, some people were hating it, but I'm watching it going, yeah, this is good, but I've also seen Abstentia, I've also seen, Found, Pieces of Talent. I'm like, there's indie films that didn't get to widescreen release that did it better than It Follows, but I'm not slamming It Follows saying it did it badly. I'm just saying there's even better indie films out there. In fact, we have indie films made by a fellow crew member in this room that have approached material like this, I think, better than what It Follows did. But props to It Follows for getting the wide release. For someone taking a chance and saying, yeah, we could get this on 1,000 screens. So anybody else get the whole STD vibe?
Yeah, definitely.
Wouldn't you say, Scott? I mean,
yeah, that's the first thing, and then I did, and I immediately got it, and I did some reading where the director, let's see, let me just double check.
That's David Robert Mitchell. I think he claimed that he wasn't going for that. But...
Well, David Robert Mitchell has been very, just like the movie is very, very, very ambiguous in virtually every scene, all except for like the 2 or 3 really big action-y type horror scenes. The whole movie is very ambiguous, and he's been saying, and he's been having they've had people calling him about the ending, people calling him about, okay, what about the STD symbolism? he says, well, mate, he's been doing that whole, well, if people want to do that, then great, or I don't know if I was really intending it, but, hey, whatever you want. He's been kind of playing that whole fence thing. I did the same thing on, like, an old student film I did. It's like, how do you think it ended? And, but, it's like, and everybody would, like, leave saying, like, God damn it, just tell me! But yeah, I got that right away. I mean, the whole thing is it's a sexually transmitted
curse.
And the curse is basically a virus, and you can pass it on to other people. It's sexually transmitted. We don't know of any other way that it could be transmitted, if possible. And honestly, I kind of got the whole thing that it was obviously it has that. There's a lot of, and if you notice, she she feels very melancholy. Someone would say she looks very unhealthy immediately afterwards, and everything. And also, I also got the feeling that it's sexually based because there's a sequence, the first person, because this virus, it can take the form of anybody, and it can take the form of people that you know or people you don't know. But the first time she sees it is in the form of this person, and I don't know if this was somebody that the guy had encountered.
See, and I took it as the form of what the guy had encountered. That's why it was a naked woman.
If that's the case, he has a lot to answer for, because it looked as though that woman had actually suffered forms of sexual violence.
Yes.
She had teeth missing. She was bleeding from the crotch. She was bleeding and urinating from the crotch. I mean, that's not. I mean, I don't know how you guys swing, but that is not normal sex. That is a sign that someone has gone through something really horrible.
God knows I like my toothless pissing women. Oh yeah.
Yeah, I'd call that violence.
They go different ways in Wisconsin. I don't judge.
Yeah,
So
Okay, Mr. Florida.
Hey, I used to live in Minnesota.
Yeah, I know. I know what you're saying with that. But another thing, though, and I want to get Andrew's thoughts on this, because was the idea of, I don't want to say slut shaming, but the idea that your sexual history follows you wherever you go. And that was almost as prevalent as the STD metaphor, wouldn't you say, Andrew, or am I off?
No, dude. That was one of the pretty evident things that happened in the story. I mean, to me, mostly I was just taking it as sort of a, like a teenage story, because I happen to have been a fan of the guy's first movie, American Sleepover.
Right.
And it was neat because they're really similar in the way that they're just kind of, the characters are just kind of floating through. Kind of, awkward and figuring things out as they happen, the way that it feels to be that age, And so I was just like, well, I mean, it's definitely not a. You remember that movie Cherry Falls several years ago, where it was the spin was, because in horror movies the kids have sex and they die. Well, in this movie, they all have an orgy because the killer's killing virgins, right? So they all get together in his house and screw. So I was like, that was what I thought. I was like, well, that's cool that having sex is the only way to get it to go away. And, given that sex is something now we're far more afraid of than violence, I thought was a real smart decision. One of the many things that the movie did right. So that was kind of it was more of just like an overall view of the piece rather than just honing in on a certain theme. I just felt like the overarching theme was just sort of, helplessness. This one of the reasons I compared it to Elm Street was just not just for the fact that the director based the story on actual nightmares that he had, but it was like, the idea of the kids kind of like not having the help of the adults, nowhere to be found in American Sleepover. The grown-ups are never seen either.
See, and that was one of the questions I had was, where the hell are the parents in this movie?
Well, they're ineffective. What would they do?
Well, I know they.
At one point, when the whole thing starts, she just says, "You can't tell Mom. She just freak."
Yeah.
It's like if they aren't ineffective, it's an assumption that they would be like, for instance, it's an assumption that they would be ineffective. Like, I think the guy that they get help from at one point says, isn't your mom going to be worried about you? Oh, she's not going to notice. I mean,
yeah. Well, you think about, like,
these
Nancy's
are all
mom, the alcoholic, remember?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and Nancy's mom was an alcoholic.
Yeah.
All the Elm Street parents had walls against, like, even greater walls against their children because of what they had done, basically.
Right.
Yeah, this is worse. They're just out to lunch, and there's no, they have no even awareness of anything. It's not. It's a
thought. It's a thought. And maybe, well, it's a thought that we actually don't know, though, how ineffective they would be, if at all. But that's the concept of teenagers, where most when you're that age. Oh, my parents, no, they just don't understand anything.
Yeah.
And honestly, they probably wouldn't. I can't imagine what they would do to help. Honestly, I can't imagine what they would do to help. But it was also a very convenient device to say, just don't tell them. And it was a very convenient way to get the adults out of the story.
Yeah, because who cares? I didn't want to see any grown-up character in this movie.
Yeah, the director just wanted to get them out of the way. You could tell that. And this is a good way to do it.
Well, he also left, actually, the age of the kids ambiguous, which I guess bugged me a little, not a lot, but,
well, they're living at home.
Well, they're living at home, but our main girl, almost felt like she was in community college.
I would say she was maybe 18 or 19, and the other one's younger.
Because the way she was talking with the Paul character was they're talking about back in school, so I'm like, okay, so these two
went to high school together.
Out of high school, right? They're at least out of high school, and then her siblings were still in high school. But still, it's one of those things where I found it interesting because a lot of films establish it, like the school they're in. You will see that establishing shot of the school sign. You know.
But see, that's why I love the movie, man, because it doesn't give a fuck about all the things that most horror movies do. I don't like. I've talked on here before. Like, I don't like explanations. They're boring. I don't like a lot of backstory. I don't like a lot of mythology I have to remember and set up. I don't even care about consistency. I just, I want the movie to be. I want to remember it after. I want to keep thinking about it after.
Yeah, actually, you bring up a good point with the not finishing. Cole, did you notice, and what did you think of his technique for some of those scenes where we didn't actually see the end result of a decision, like when she was on the beach by herself and she saw the three young men out in the boat?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I stylistically, I dug all that stuff. I did. Yeah, I really did. I enjoyed all that. I mean, all of it. I enjoyed, well, in particular, the cinematography and the way it cohered with the editing, which it's hard to tell who does what. I'd like to think it's this director, David Robert Mitchell. I'd like to think he's working closely with everybody in the crew. Right. But yeah, no, I love all that. So stylistically, this is an important movie. I mean, if you like horror movies beyond, gore or the obvious reasons, this is one to see. I recommend it. His decision, the pacing, I enjoyed too. I enjoyed. There's so much about this movie that I really like. And then I don't know, man. I mean, just to answer your question, yeah, stylistically. I mean, to go to your previous question, the lack of parents is bullshit. You guys are talking about Elm Street. Man, Elm Street has several scenes with the parents. Elm Street does not shy away from any conflict or interaction, and I'm not trying to be cocky. I'm standing up for Elm Street because it's one of the best films I've ever seen, man. Those parents are complex. The scene where Tina's mother, right away, right after the first nightmare scene, Tina's mother comes in and you can tell she cares. But right behind that is a stepfather who's sleazy. When are you coming back to bed? And right away you get multiple levels of why Tina's sexuality is the way it is. I mean, there's nothing even remotely that complex in this film. This film is a one-trick pony, and it's effective, but stylistically, that's where its strengths are. I would like to see this director with a script like fucking Elm Street, and I'm talking about the script. If you guys haven't read Wes Craven's script,
I have.
It's
brilliant. It's got a couple bombshells that really did not make the final cut of the film.
Yeah. Right.
So that made me look at the movie in a whole new way. Well, it's like, oh my gosh.
It's the style of this film that made me surprised that it made it to the big screen because it doesn't. It's not your modern mass-produced horror film. As Andrew said, it doesn't spell everything out for you. She's on the beach after running away from it again. She's staring at the three guys. You know what she's contemplating, but you're never quite sure if she actually went through with it or not. She starts to, and then we cut away. And then there's a few other moments as well where there's a decision or something that's supposed to happen or something that's supposed to, a decision be made, but we never quite see the result. We just see them the next day, basically. And so you have to kind of piece it together for yourself. And that's not a bad
stuff. Amazing stuff.
And that's not a bad thing.
No.
Well, it is a bad thing if you're like a horror fan who's got like this real specific list of everything that you want a movie to be, or you're in there expecting it to be the second coming because of all the hype, and there's no way when the bar is set that high that you're talking about an audience that's, for a large part impossible to please. And so the best thing for a filmmaker to do in the horror genre is to not pander to them like at all. And this guy's a huge horror fan. Like you can tell from the Halloween influence on it, like you mentioned. I mean, that stuff is really, really obvious in there, but yet he doesn't do like a Rob Zombie with it. You know what I mean?
They are a lot of the hype is going to be a disservice to this movie though, because there's every other.
But that's what got it into the theaters. That's why I was able to see it.
It's like a blessing and a curse though. I mean, that's how it's getting natural. I mean, naturally, otherwise it's going to just disappear, and maybe like a few diehard fans of the genre will discover it and say like, "Hey, this thing that came out on DVD and streaming is pretty good."
But, I just imagine like back in the day.
But this one, every Rue Morgue and Fangoria and everything else is saying like, "Oh my gosh, the best new horror film of the year," blah 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 blah, and I think it's gonna. And not surprised to hear that it's pissing some people off, because I think that is something it's never going to, it's not that type of movie.
Yeah, and people can't get over themselves and really admit that something's really good anymore. That's part of the problem. It's like you think about like you're just the average person that's hearing about this movie Easy Rider back in the late 60s, early 70s. Like, well, it's so great, let me go see it. It's nothing fucking like any movie that most people were seeing. But the young people were like, fuck yeah, this is nothing like it, and that's why it's great. It just has to take enough risks to be really different and to not be concerned with alienating, because like who's going to save horror? Adam Green with his found footage movie or Ty West with his found footage movie? It's it's got to be someone that is actually a filmmaker,
Well, for me, I'm just hoping this might open the door at least to people's ideas of those who enjoy the film to looking and exploring and finding other indie horror that up until now has lived in obscurity. Like I said, even out of the indie horror, the previous indie horror we've had, like we mentioned before, You're Next and that have made a festival jump to the big wide release, those kind of had those modern horror elements at least somewhat in here. This hit the big screen, and this weekend a whole shitload of teenagers tweeted the hell out of it going, oh my god, this movie sucks, because, and it's not their fault, okay, and I'm not saying anybody's better than anyone else as far as taste for horror. What I'm saying, though, is you have a whole generation that has grown up on the Paranormal Activity jump scare film where that is a norm for them. That's what they expect. The jump scare, that's the only method that horror films have used that they feel effectively, when there's many other ways you can do a horror film. And this one does those many other ways, But no
plus
one's...
they're on Twitter while they're watching the movie anyway,
Well, yeah.
So they didn't really fucking see it.
Yeah, you're right. Now, but for me, it's like, especially all the technical aspects are what really stood out for me. And, then we have a very young cast of not necessarily complete unknowns, but not exactly known either, which is what you kind of want for a horror film like this, because then you're not focused on, oh my God, it's this person. Now, Micah Monroe, who played Jay, the main character, she was just seen in The Guest, which got a huge amount of buzz. It only went to video on demand and DVD distribution. It never got wide release, but The Guest, apparently, I haven't seen it yet, is supposed to be really good.
I've heard good things. I have not seen it.
It Follows is the first hyped movie that I think that I really liked, because every year it's something. It was The Guest last year, and it was Your Next one year, and it was like what was Cabin in the Woods one year. Every year was like, this is the movie that's changing everything, and this is the return to what we need. And I watch it and go, well, but it doesn't have what I need. It doesn't have what I want. And I was starting to think maybe I'm just not a horror fan anymore. Maybe I gotta give my card in and go.
I know exactly.
Maybe I'm past. I'm not the guy they're making these for anymore, and that's fine. That's fine. I got a shitload of old good movies. Don't worry about me. I'm good. I don't have to see what everyone else clearly is seeing in these things. But there's always one or two things where I was like, oh, why'd you do that? You know what I'm saying? Like, why with the CGI, or why'd you put the whole story in the first 10 minutes and just, jack off with your dialogue for the rest of the movie and few gore here and there? Why did you do that? Or like, hey, remember this? This is from Halloween 3. Yeah, I remember, fucker. Just get an idea. So to me, It Follows was like, it did all the things. I don't know, man. I feel like when I go to a horror movie now, it's like I know more of what I don't want than what I do. So there's like a huge, there's a lot of room to surprise me. And I was just like, I don't want to see any CGI. I know that. I don't want there to be a big explanation for everything that happened. I don't want that. I don't want a lot of flashy editing. It was like, remember Under the Skin not too long ago? Really cool movie.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
It made me think about the way that one is, but I could feel people, in the theater getting twitchy, like, why aren't things happening quickly? Why did that just happen?
Well,
why don't they tell me? Like, it's not Scooby-Doo's fault for setting up that whole, structure.
Yeah.
But not everything's got to follow it, thank fuck,
Well, it follows, too, with it. The actual, let's see, I watched it because I didn't get it. I watched it actually a screener for We Live Film. We managed to get a screener, so I watched it at home rather than at the theater, because the nearest theater was like an hour and a half away or hour away where it was showing, and I'm like, yeah, and so we were able to watch the screener, but I paid attention to the time. The first actual, what you could consider real action sequence, like something major happened that you've seen in other horror films, is an hour into the film.
I love it. I love it.
And I'm not saying that as a bad thing. I'm just saying it surprised me while I'm watching this film going, I can't believe this got to wide release, because I'm like, you're going to have a lot of people in the audience checking their watch. Now, I will say I did at
It's a good part of the year to put out a risky movie then.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, definitely. Now, I will say there were a few times where I did sigh a bit, and I said this in my review of it. I think it could have possibly been trimmed a bit. For me, it felt a little long in the tooth, only because I'm like, I get the idea. I get what you're going for. I get the concept, and then it got just a little repetitive and long for me in a few of the scenes. I think if they were to trim down, I would have enjoyed them more. But that's just me. It just felt a little long because I got what they were going for, and I'm like, okay, let's move on a little different. But
dude, before we stop, you guys have to remind me to read what I did with my friend Henrik, director of Babysitter Massacre and several other fine films you can find on Amazon.com. he and I were texting back and forth, and I was telling him all the endings because he was like, I think the ending was a little weak, and so I sent him like 3 different endings, and I want to make sure I read those to you guys. I just now thought about that. Sorry, don't let me forget. And
okay, we won't forget
endings to It Follows.
Oh yeah, we'll get to the ending in a minute because that is a major component for this film. But did anyone else feel that it maybe got just a little repetitive and a little long in some of the scenes?
Oh, just a freaking smidge. Okay, guys, I can't hold back anymore, okay? Because I'm listening and I'm taking it all in, okay? Okay, this, all right, let me just say this, that I am already, if anybody, other filmmakers in the audience, anybody wants to help bankroll the porn parody to this movie, I am totally ready to go with it. I think that it writes itself, and I even have the name for it, because the name for the porn parody is also my review of this movie.
Oh boy.
It Swallows.
Oh.
I know. I'm sorry, guys. I'm just, and I wanted, one of the reasons I wanted to be here is I wanted to take in, what other people are seeing in this movie. And this movie does a lot of things right. I agree. The I think Cole mentioned the cinematography.
Yeah, man.
Absolutely right. By the way, I even looked it up. His name is if I'm not butchering it, Mike Giulakis.
Yeah.
Yes.
Mike Giulakis. We should just mention his name. I feel
Mike
like
Giulakis. I feel like cinematographers don't get enough.
Movie.
Yeah, well, cinematographers don't get enough credit, in my opinion, anyway. So
Sure.
yeah, let that out there. He does a great job. I think he's done tons of shorts. It's only his second feature. He did a fantastic job. I liked the way the film was shot.
Man.
One thing I really liked that I don't get from most horror films is I liked the characters a lot. The characters felt like real people, and they weren't unlikable. I could relate to them. They're okay, even though I'm not, a young kid anymore. I could relate to them. I got it. Okay, great. I'm still trying to figure out why I did not like this movie at all. But honestly, yeah, part of it is definitely. And, unfortunately, our cohort, Derek Carey, was not able to be here tonight. I know he didn't care for the movie. I haven't heard exactly why, but I know he didn't care for the movie. He's a great editor and stuff. And I think, Mark, you do editing as well, correct?
A little bit, yeah.
I've edited every single movie that I've made.
There you go.
I've made almost 100.
And I looked at this, and this is like a 100-minute movie. I mean, this thing should have been 85 minutes max. It was. I'm sorry, guys. The pace. I have no problem with slow pace, but I was really bored to tears in this movie. I was just like constantly thinking, like, oh my god, this thing is. It's so dull. It's so dull. And there really wasn't a lot going on. Is the thing is that it's a very, and I think there's a place in horror films for very simple concepts, but. This was a very simple concept that they almost tried to inflate into something bigger than it was, which is It Follows. That's basically the plot. Well, it follows. It's like, yeah, there's going to be something, and guess what? It's going to follow you, and eventually it's going to catch you, and then, that's it.
While it was my complaint, the defense that I could see, and I know Andrew really enjoyed this film, and he can either possibly say that I'm right or just so full of shit. But I think the director, I think he could justify the longer length of scenes and the longer times between things actually happening, is he wanted to convey the waiting and the anxiousness and the thing that your main character, Jay, was feeling, waiting for this thing waiting for something to happen. So you could say that the director was going for trying to get the audience to feel what she was feeling, which is, I'm waiting and nothing's happening. But
were they feeling boredom? Because that was the problem. I was feeling is that I think that that's great, but that means that you have to kind of keep a level of tension going, and I don't feel like it was keeping the level of at least not for me. There's lots of people who disagree with me.
Right.
Because this is getting mixed reviews. Some people are loving it, and some people not so much. It did not keep that level of tension for me, and I felt like a lot of the ambiguity some of the ambiguity was well placed, and some of it was placed as if they didn't really know what was going on. And it really wasn't. I mean, yeah, it was based on nightmares, but if you just see something following you all the time, that's a very basic nightmare. That's a very it just seemed to go on way too long. I liked the symbolism. I liked the way it was shot. I liked the characters. So I was trying to say, like, God, why don't I like this movie? And when it came down to it, I had to realize, well, because it's a horror film, and I never once felt scared.
Mm-hmm.
I never once felt a level of suspense. I never once felt that moment. And so it's not. It's that the film didn't work. It's that it made an attempt, and it did a lot of things right. But at its core value, the film should, create suspense and scares, and really have you going along for the whole ride. And for me, it just didn't. I wanted to bolt out of that theater so fast when the credits came up. Honestly.
And I can see your point with that. Like you said, I felt it a little long, not quite as adamant as you were about it, but I did feel it a little bit long in there. But Andrew or Cole, do you think maybe that was the director was trying to go for, though, was trying to convey that same feeling that she was having to the audience and kind of place them in that anticipation of waiting for nothing to happen yet, and then finally something does happen and it's like, holy shit. Do you think he was going for that, and that's maybe why we had periods of not much happening?
Go for it, Cole.
Oh, yeah, I would say absolutely. Thanks, Andrew. I appreciate it. No, I would say absolutely. That's the one thing, not the one thing. I'm sorry, let me clarify. I like this film.
Mm-hmm.
And if I was forced, I don't know why I think of You're Next when I think of this film. It may be the Dayquil.
It's a powerful inspiration. I know that. I've used it myself.
No, I think, yeah, the editing and the whole stylistically, that's what interested me. Unlike Scott, I think I'm actually in Scott's favor on his whole viewpoint of this movie, but to me it was the story that was, I don't want to say like repugnant, and I don't want to say too simplistic, because I'm sitting here recommending In Fear as an alternative for a good stage horror movie, and that movie has no plot. It's entirely
there's nothing wrong with simplicity in a horror film.
Yeah, exactly.
Halloween is simplistic,
Exactly. Thank you, Scott. But right. I just, yeah, man, I like that, and I think all the pacing was deliberate. Like I said earlier, I'd like to think it's the director and the editor and the cinematographer. Probably wasn't this way, but in my world, that's how I work, is, the three of you get together and you just don't stop until the thing is perfect. And I have that feeling from this, but I also have this feeling of there's a gimmick there, and the gimmick is STD, and it's I don't know, does that belong in entertainment? It may belong in a movie called Kids.
Or Contracted was a pretty good STD.
Or Contracted too, yeah.
I don't know if it's entertainment. I don't know. I wasn't entertained, I guess, and I would see this director. If this director did anything else, I'd be the first in line. It's not like I'm.
You might like American Sleepover then if you like Kids.
I've never seen it.
Is that I'll be honest with you. I was unfamiliar that he had done that movie until you had mentioned it.
And they were is
it kind of more like a teen drama, or is it a comedy, or?
It's like a night in the life, kind of like a more arty Dazed and Confused, a little bit like Freaks and Geeks maybe. Okay. I thought it was great. I mean, I went into it being a fan of that, and then being excited by the idea of him inserting horror into that and hoping it didn't intrude too much on his style.
Well, like I said, I thought that he wrote the characters very well. Let's face it, we all love all of us that are seated here right now, and probably a lot of the people that are listening to the show right now. Thank you very much. Are fans of horror films, but we can probably all also agree that most horror films fail in how they write their characters, which is usually not very well. You know?
They're usually based on the premise and what they think the audience wants to see.
This one wrote the characters really well, and that's why I was so this is why I couldn't just be like, oh well, it didn't work out. I was like, why didn't it work out? I was so mad because I liked what they had done. So I liked that they did something that most horror films don't do, but then I didn't think that they fulfilled their obligation as a horror film, and it was really frustrating as to me, personally.
That's probably why I liked it a lot, because it didn't do anything that the horror movies really do that I've seen lately, and I'm like, well, that's awesome. I want this movie. I don't go to horror looking to get scared. I honestly want everybody to get the fuck out so I can watch it by myself. And I'm like, this movie, if it sends horror fans running down the aisles because they can't stand it, I'm like, awesome. That's great. That's what it takes to scare them.
But then I'm not saying that you have to like go through like a checklist. Okay, jump scare here.
But there's things we kind of expect if we're looking to get entertained. There are certain things.
I want something to do something new and different, and it's getting less and less likely, especially some of us on this, like myself, I can certainly say we're kind of entering middle age and everything like that, and let's face it, we don't get nearly as passionate about each new thing that happens like we would say like 20 years ago. 20 years ago you heard It Follows is the next big thing. Really? Let's go! Boom! Paranormal Activity, next big thing. Really? Let's go! Boom!
But thank goodness people paid to see it, and that's part of why it's encouraging for the next like independent to go.
Right.
A few people are paying to see it now, and I've heard it written both ways. People, like for instance, like I think the Deadline report said that It Follows bombed because it's only. They said it bombed because it made less than $5 million. Like, yeah, but it had a super low budget and it wasn't supposed to go to theaters at all.
It's in the top 5. That's not a bomb.
So I
think
not
the new Will Ferrell movie.
Exactly. Well, exactly. I'm saying they're wrong. Yeah, because I'm saying like compared to what they thought they were going to get from a few streaming things.
Yeah.
It's doing better than what they expected.
And it's a better movie than The Interview.
Yeah, that's for sure. One, you mentioned characters, Scott, and let me know, especially the filmmaker guys, if this makes sense. I hope this does, because again, I put this in when I did a review on it too. Is everybody's performance of their characters was really well done. Okay, I loved it. Just like Scott said, they felt real. The chemistry between the characters, I didn't feel it at all. If that makes sense. Everybody played their role well. The feelings between one another, though, I didn't.
Well, to me, it was awkward, and that added to the realism because.
And maybe that's because maybe that's what got me is because that was the realism because.
The one girl that farts, man, that was the best.
Yes, the farty girl. No, but just between how you can tell there's a chemistry once in a while and they play off each other. Here, it felt like everybody was doing their own role, and maybe it was going for that realistic, your own person type of thing. But I just didn't feel like any connection between the sisters, her siblings, at all, really. And her, and I know that wasn't like the main focus of it, but still, it was just like.
Well, I think disconnect is a theme in the movie too.
Yeah.
I kind of got that domestic malaise, when you're not out with friends, you're just kind of hanging out of the porch, doing whatever, watching a movie, they watched Killers from Space on TV. I loved that movie, and stuff like that, Yeah, it was. I mean, I kind of got that that lazy days kind of feeling,
Mm-hmm. I guess for me that was just a little off-putting. I don't know why either, but it stood out for me as, wow, they're performing their character really well, but as a group, I'm just not, at any moment, any one of these people could just say bye. I didn't get any feeling of closeness at all. Even the sisters, as they were trying to protect her, I just didn't really feel.
I like that the one kid was such a bad shot. He accidentally shot
her,
but it wasn't a big scene where she's in the chest and she dies. It's just like a nick, but it sucks. It felt very lived in and real to me. It went along with the cinematography and the music.
Yeah, but I mean, I guess for me,
I did like the music. I'm always a fan of keyboard scores, and so I liked that music.
So I guess for me, the too realistic characters, if that sounds bad, I'm sorry, folks. I guess for me, it took me a little bit away from it, that I didn't feel that any connection that they had with anybody else in there, and in their relationships, and I guess that took me aback a little bit, or took me out of it.
Oh, I kind of got that whole suburban feel of it, like if especially finding out that they do live in the suburbs right outside the city limits. I kind of you think of if you're a nerd like me, you start thinking of that Rush song Subdivisions, and you're like, yeah, I get that.
Well, Kate was talking about the authenticity of the surroundings because she actually is a Detroit resident.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, and this is Detroit. I didn't know it was Detroit until somebody said 8 Mile. I'm like, oh,
yeah,
I know that.
I realized when I saw the RoboCop statue. I don't know if anybody else caught that.
Yep, I saw that. Yeah.
I'm kidding. It wasn't in the goddamn.
No.
Oh, see, goddamn, don't do that. I
don't know. No, I totally saw that. Andrew. Yeah, there was
a reflection
of
Dr. Detroit in the window.
Yeah, that's right.
A little claw hand.
Oh, I should watch Dr. Detroit. Cool. Now that's a Detroit movie that I would like to see again. Dr. Detroit.
No, I didn't see the statue either, Scott. I'm just pulling your leg. But
that was awesome right there.
Andrew's just our little Loki. He's our prankster god of the spoiler room.
We'll see.
I got them again.
Just That's dinosaur bones.
Man, you guys flowed right into it.
I think they trust me inherently because I'm some sort of authority that's paid to.
Andrew, I think we had Cole even thinking for a minute. Wait, RoboCop statue?
He's sick, but he's not that sick.
Well, most people nobody ever knows when I'm kidding in real life, so it's good that I have it turned back on me every now and then.
Speaking of them being in Detroit, so we got our group of suburbanites that head to the hood. Well, not the hood, but to the public pool, and let's talk about this final solution that they've come up with for our horror fiend, where they have the swimming pool and they've taken their electronic devices.
I'll tell you, dude, that's the one part of the movie that almost made me mad, because I was like, if this thing, after all the original things that I felt it did, if it ends like in a pool like the faculty or Jennifer's body, I'm going to get really mad. It didn't. Thankfully, that wasn't the end of the movie. And it was a good idea. I'm like, that's cool,
It was fitting for kids, but at the same time,
because when it started to throw all the shit back at him, that was great, wasn't it?
And then there was like, oh, it didn't work.
I was like, why did I use the TV?
I did read something brief today, and this is that same article where that director got interviewed about stuff and everything, and he flat out says, "Oh, it was a stupid plan of the kids, I mean, but it was the type of plan that dumb kids would come up with,
right?
And was the idea. Now, of course, there's the ending, and there's, whether it works or not, they kind of leave it up. Guys, again, the show's called The Spoiler Room. If you have any interest in the movie.
Before we get to the final scene, Scott, are you talking about the pool yet?
I was just talking about I was just saying that there's a thought of, whether it worked or not.
Oh, okay, yeah. No, go ahead.
That was it. I was going to say, it's like there's still, it's left up in the air whether it worked or not, because, like I said before, the film is really purposely ambiguous. about lots of things.
Yeah. What did you think of that pool scene, Cole? I mean, I guess that is something dumb kids would come up with.
Yeah, honestly, this is weird. I actually liked that bit.
Uh-huh.
And I liked the idea that they had to kind of leave the suburb. I don't know. Maybe I'm reading too much into it, but I liked that bit. How they kind of had to get out of their comfort zone, and yeah, I thought that was interesting. I thought it was fine.
No,
I don't have anything elaborate to say about it other than I liked it.
Oh, go ahead.
To me, it was cool because, like, we've seen the smart, resourceful kid in horror movies that can somehow, booby trap their house and the bad guy or whatever, so like that. I like that they weren't self-aware, like in Scream and shit. I like that they weren't suddenly like action heroes. I like that it all stayed. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's just so many things that it did right, and to do dumb things, or just like to try things.
They were realistic.
Very realistic.
But they had to do something, which I'm glad that they did, in a sense, whether it worked or not, because again, it's something else that too many other horror films have been doing lately is they mistake dread for suspense.
Mm-hmm.
There's like a certain inevitability of people just going to the same thing, and I think that that's actually what a lot of It Follows was like. This at least interrupted it enough to say you have to give the people a fighting chance. Otherwise, what is the whole point of sitting this movie out if you know exactly how it's going to end and it's just a matter of when?
Right.
Right. And so I think that movies you have to give them some way out. Doesn't mean you have to have a happy ending. Doesn't mean it has to work. But you have to give them some sort of a way out. Otherwise, Otherwise, there's no stakes in it for you as the viewer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I agree on that. Definitely, they at least gave them something, but they were bumbling. They were realistically bumbling, which was decent. Like I think Andrew said, he accidentally shoots his friend while trying to shoot the invisible guy.
That was great because he wouldn't suddenly be a great shot. In a lot of movies they do that. There's
and the only way. Oh, sorry.
Action hero. No, I hate how many horror movies end up being action by the end. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Like, stick with the. You know what I mean?
And they do, and at the end he has to be point blank range. I mean, to where if he misses that shot, well, then there's just no hope for him.
Yeah.
And they give it out to where the monster is quote unquote dead. Now, here's the thing, though. I know it came up earlier in the movie that it could take the form of anybody. He said, but when they shoot the pool scene, and I saw this come up with someone else, and I wanted to bring it to you guys. Do you think when they were shooting the pool scene that they actually had a plan to where it was supposed to look like someone, or do you think maybe it was supposed to look more like a beast or something, and they may have changed it later on in the script? Cause
I'm just glad it wasn't a beast. That would have sucked if it would. You know what I'm saying? Well, like the end of so many horror movies, you finally see what it really looks like.
I would have been pissed off too.
Yeah, that.
No, but the way her dialogue is when they're asking her what does it look like,
she doesn't want to say.
And she doesn't want to say.
Well, the reason, and it turns out the reason she doesn't, again, Sky's spoiler room, and it's the reason, of course, she doesn't want to say is. She knows that she's going to be asking them to shoot at something that looks like their father.
Oh, yeah, that's true. Yeah, that's true.
That's because it was taking the image. If you look at the pictures, it took the image of her father.
Yeah,
it might have looked like Obama, which would have been equally difficult.
That's like, boy, we are going to alienate some of our things, but you know what? I'll bet you this thing is going to make tons of money in Alabama.
You got me there, Scott. You're right. Yeah, I can definitely see that. Then, yeah, it looked like her dad, so that's why.
Yeah, because the one looked like the dude's mom, and then it had its titty out, and it raped him or something. That was messed up right there.
That was the guy who took the pity, the ultimate pity the pity screw, the ultimate pity screw, and finally having sex with her so he gets the curse. And what does the thing pose as? His mom, half naked, that jumps him and kills
Gotta
him.
admit, that would have been disorienting for anyone.
That would have.
Advantage,
hey,
mom.
Hey, mom, no, Mom, that's no okay. I don't need a midnight snack. Hey, what's with your titty? Oh my God!
I thought we were done with that years ago. What is this?
Yeah. So we'll move on here to the.
I told you the porn parody writes itself.
Right.
We'll move on to the final scene, to where still I'm not quite feeling the emotion between our final two characters here, but that's okay. That's just me. So they're walking, and we still get the thing out of focus, or do we? Cole, it follows? Is it still following them?
Oh man. I just do the filmmakers even know? I'm not sure. I don't know. Boy.
Do they want to
I
know?
sound like an asshole if I say I don't care. I don't know.
No, actually, I don't care. I don't care either.
I really don't. I think. You know what it is. I've got to cool off a little bit from all the references to The Shining and all these great horror movies before I can look at it. But I can tell you, Kubrick had a very definite ending for The Shining, regardless of how many times he refilmed it. Ditto with Wes Craven for Elm Street. There's a definite ending. This is, it's very, very in your own hands, which is awesome. Mm-hmm. I love it. I cannot wait for this guy's next movie. But before we go off the show, I just, again, like to throw out In Fear for anybody who like an ambiguous movie that, maybe, I don't know, is maybe a little bit. I would recommend In Fear before this film. And mm-hmm. I stand by that film because it didn't get much attention. And it's a 3-character piece, and it does deal with sexuality in a more interesting way, I thought. Mm-hmm. Teenage sexuality. This ending, I thought, was, I don't want to say a cop-out, but I kind of, how else would this movie have ended, really?
Right. Sure.
Yeah.
Well, a non-ending is the best way to go for what I like best about the movie, my overall impression of it. I'm like, that could have been the make or break moment. There were several make or break moments for me because I'm admittedly picky about horror movies, and I was just like, don't have some hand come up, don't have some, don't do that shit. Just end it right here. Go to black, and they cut to black right when I would have as an editor. So.
Yeah, I was kind of scared when she was looking over the edge of the pool. I'm like, oh no, don't.
Yeah, I was like, don't do that.
You know what I mean, though? But most movies do. Most movies
do. Right, and that's the whole thing, is that this film is not your normal wide release horror film, because your normal wide release horror film would have had the hand come up, one last or whatever, and they do another shot into the pool to kill it, or something along that lines, and it would be dead, or whatever, rather than leaving the ambiguous ending. So you like the ambiguous ending as well, Andrew?
Yeah, dude, but I do have a couple of alternate endings if you guys want to hear what they are.
Sure. Well, let's just see. Scott, did you have any thought on that final ending scene?
Well, I feel like that, yeah, he's going to probably try to say that, yeah, that is exactly... Mm-hmm. That is exactly while that is exactly what they were trying to say, is that no, it's still probably following them. For me, I say nah, it's not. I'm like that they kept it up so that I could make up my own mind and kind of go up along happily and stuff like that.
Yeah, that's kind of awesome.
Because honestly, you can take it either way. It was so ambiguous. You can kind of see something blurry in the background. Right. And I think. No, but I mean, I think it also misses the point to also say the ending, because I think, where you can get a lot of the meaning of the movie is that the kid who's got shot there and is in the hospital, is that she's reading from The Idiot.
Oh,
she's reading with the idiot, and she's talking about the certainty
yes.
of death. And that's the thing that always comes up again and again and again in the idiot. I've actually got some quotes up here now.
Wow.
And, I'm not going to go into all of them because they are freaking long.
So you're going with the maybe it isn't the STD thing so much as teenagers facing their mortality.
I think it can be both, but I mean, like for instance, one of the quotes from the idiot that they don't say that I'll say is as a shorter quote that I brought up here because I read the book a few years ago too. I like Dostoevsky, so. Yeah, he's it's amazing. But I mean, like one of the quotes that I just brought up, on one of the little websites, so I could have something is, take a soldier and put him in front of a cannon in a battle and fire it at him, and he'll go on hoping. But read out a certain death sentence to that same soldier, and he'll go mad or start to weep.
Yeah.
Well, what does that say about like what these characters are going through in this movie, right? And she just happens to be reading that same story, and she reads that really, that other long aside about certainty, which was totally the inappropriate thing to read at that. Like, what? Whoa, way to bring down the room, sis. But I think the idea is the certainty of it, because actually, if you go on a long enough, timeline, none of us are getting out of this alive, guys.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
And I don't think the last shot that I don't think the point was that something may or may not have been following them. I think it was that they were holding hands when and if it did.
Yeah. Right.
I think it's that they went on living and stuff, and I liked that. And I liked it also that it kept you thinking about it. I just didn't care for most of the movie, but like I said, there was a lot of things it did that I did enjoy.
Sure.
And the dork gets the girl, blat out.
And the dork gets about there's time! Dorks represent, yo!
Now, I am definitely curious at Mr. One, Andrew Shearer, what are the alternate endings that you have come up with?
All right, well, so this was my buddy Henrik Kuto, filmmaker Henrik Kuto. Text me, It Follows was cool, week ending. So here I give him 3 alternates. The first one is mom shows up at the front door, the naked old man pulls a shitty-looking dummy through the and of course he thinks that's funny, and I say, no, wait, cut back to her in the pool alone, a giant titty pops out of the water and pulls her under. And the last one here, and thank you for indulging me do this. No, wait, the phone rings and a voice says, in 7 days you will suck a dick. I added my voice thing to that, but that's what I told him. And then Henrik said, not to be outdone, says, the more I think about it, the more I start to like the ending. So there you go.
Good. It's like that. I like the Gonzo-rific spin on the ending, though.
Yes.
What are you gonna do?
Yeah, I enjoyed the ending to this as well. I'm glad it ended the way it did because it completed the film as not being a Hollywood horror mass-produced film. At nowhere in this point in this film, I think, where you could have landed in the cliche of your 99% of your other bigger studio horror films, it never goes there. And I like that about this film. I think that was one of the big appeals for me, was the fact that here we have a wide-release horror film that any formula that you've gotten from your Conjurings and your Paranormal Activities and your, as above, so below type of feel, you don't have that here. It definitely is indie horror, and it's not a what you would expect to be a studio released film. So the fact that they did get a film like this out into the studios, into the big screens, 1,000-some screens, is impressive, and it gives me hope for future indie films. And I think we all feel that way, at least. That
yeah, I mean, I bought the ticket. I didn't even know it was about I was like, I don't even care if this is good. I just don't want it to be like everything else and make me regret going to see another wide-release horror movie because I really have no. I hate to sound crazy. I have little to no interest in them. I've just seen so many, and
I'm with you.
You know.
I'm with you. Every 6 months or so, somebody comes out and says this is the next big horror film, and usually I'm disappointed. I'm usually disappointed in a different way than I was with It Follows, because usually it's some nihilistic, agony-gasm basically, and this was not such that. But even though this movie didn't work for me, I'm just the only thing I'm different on is that I don't feel that I don't think it didn't affect me in any way. In fact, after I was done, I wasn't even thinking about it, which I think I was supposed to at least be thinking about it afterwards. I was just done with it. My thing is that I'm exactly in the. I'm the only reason I hope I did not interrupt you, Andrew. I'm sorry. But I was. No. But I was in the same boat as Andrew. The only difference is that now I'm still waiting.
Right.
Andrew got it, got what he needed, and I'm so happy for that. And a lot of people got what they needed, and I'm so happy for that. I'm still waiting.
Sure. What about you, Cole? The final thoughts with It Follows. Did it give you hope for future indie films, possibly? Them taking a chance on it? Probably.
Absolutely, man. I mean, whenever any horror movie makes money, it's a victory for anybody. And I really believe that. I've never got on a high horse about any horror movie that's made a lot of money that wasn't. Well, let me take that back. The majority of horror movies that have been trendsetters, I've never regretted liking. I supported Scream. I supported all of the little obscure movies in between that and Saw, and supported Saw up until it became what it is now. But anything that makes money, as Robert Englund once said, we're about making movies, and in order to make movies, you got to make some money, man. And I hope this movie makes some money. I really do, because it's a good film. On the other hand, I don't think this is the direction that horror should go.
No.
I'm very, very hesitant about. Well, let me say this, and I apologize for my stuttering. Again, it's been a long day, but it's all about script, baby. I mean, it really is. I'm into scripts, and the notion of writing a good script is in danger of being a lost art form. I mean, the ability to write a script that doesn't have too much purple prose but is descriptive enough, that is that perfect blueprint to get a really phenomenal movie funded, is lost. I mean, so much of the time, as movies are made, the script evaporates.
Yeah.
And the movies that made this particular film possible, like Nightmare on Elm Street, like The Shining, have stories that are pretty frickin' solid. Beyond just a simple metaphor or two simple metaphors. I mean, and this is, I'll end it with this. I mean, I made a list. Elm Street deals with alcoholism, child abuse, child neglect, not to mention Tina's shady boyfriend, premarital sex, the nature of dreams, the relationship with sleep and the relationship with God, vigilante justice, loopholes in the legal system, and the notion that a parent's sin can be passed down to their children. And all good horror stories should at least strive for that, like Frankenstein, like everything should have, like The Crow. I just feel like a really good horror story should be able to compete with any other good story. It shouldn't just be about STDs. And I think that's what this film is about. And I didn't know that going into it. I knew it was about sex, but and I don't have any hang-ups about sex, God knows. But I hate it when something is hinged on a gimmick. It just bugs me. And I don't think horror needs to be. I don't think it needs to be. That being said, people should see this movie. I mean,
yes,
it's stylistically, it's amazing. I'd put it next to even kind of, I would maybe say it's the Requiem of a Dream of horror movies in a way. It's very unique, and I support it. I don't see putting it on a list with modern classics.
Right.
Sure.
Right.
And I'm the same way. I think it needs support, and because of other indie films out there that are done what I feel, better than this. Not saying this is bad. I'm just saying there are even more solid indie horror films out there that never see a widescreen outside of a festival.
Yes.
And so I'm hoping I'm you have a little inkling of hope that it opens the door and people go to Gonzorific Films and take a chance and do something, buy something they probably wouldn't normally buy. Me, I'd buy all of Andrew's stuff, but
thanks, Mark. You all right, man?
And that's not just me kissing up either. It's true fact. It is the fact that a lot of the people, the filmmakers that I know, I like their stuff, and so I'm hoping, even if it's not the mass populace, which it's not going to be, but even if it starts a new, younger group of individuals who will take chances and go, oh, maybe I'll take a look at Absentia, maybe I'll take a look at Pajama Nightmare, maybe I'll take a look at Dead Weight or Found or these other ones. There's one that I saw that actually got distribution that I didn't see a huge amount of talk about, and it's unfortunate because it's another film that reminded me like this one, which was done stylistically different, and it's called A Measure of Our Sins. I believe it's
I've never even heard of it.
Mark,
Wow.
did you talk about that one on?
Yep, I talked about
Radio?
it.
Yeah, okay.
Yep, yeah, when we did our
The year-end show. I remember that.
yeah, it was a year ago now, but yeah, it was the year-end show where we talking about our favorites of the year, and A Measure of Our Sins was the one that came up for me in indie film because it was different for the type of film it was. It wasn't exactly horror. I mean, it was kind of, it was disturbing drama almost, but it was just wild what it did, and then it like really pulls the trigger at the very end, but it didn't feel gratuitous or anything. It just was very refreshing, and this film was refreshing in the fact that at least here we have a movie that went to over 1,000 screens when it's a type of movie that you wouldn't have expected to be on 100 screens.
Yeah, man.
And the fact that happened with this film gives me hope, at least some hope, for future films that will be even more solid indie films than this one. And hopefully those get to widescreen and more people realize that there is a whole nother world out there of indie horror films being produced where your originality is coming from. And I've been preaching that for a long time. I'm sure people are tired of hearing me say it, but it's true.
No, you got to keep on doing it, man. You got to keep on preaching.
The original horror stuff is still coming from the indie scene more so than Hollywood. Not saying it's not always from Hollywood does sometimes surprise you, but the majority, you're more likely to get an original, refreshing, different horror film from the indie scene than you will from a mass-produced big studio project. So keep that in mind, folks. Go see It Follows. Even if you may not like it, support it so that you can get even better indie films out to the big screen and get noticed, because there is a lot of good stuff out there. I think we're going to wrap it up for the evening, gentlemen. So real quick, let's start with you, Scott. Where can they find your stuff?
You can find me at movieocrity.com. That's where you're going to see all the podcasts I'm on, anything I write, anytime I actually decide to do an episode of my web series, all that stuff. It's movieocrity.com.
And Cole, how about you? Why don't you give them your Facebook stuff that you do?
I am on Horror Roar or Shadows and Lovers Productions. Additionally, the new film, The Last Great Horror Movie, will be released within the next 5 to 6 months. I'm just trying to decide.
That's awesome.
I'm trying to decide whether or not to wait for Halloween. It's done. It's just. Anyways, I do want to plug that because it's been a 3-year project of which Mark has a pretty killer cameo. Oh, really? Yeah. It's good. I'm not just plugging Mark. It's a good scene. But it's please stay tuned to Shadows and Lovers Productions. The page is a little dead right now, but that's because the movie is alive. And also, if you're interested in talking movies, Cole Meredith on Facebook. If you want to talk movies, man, I'm always up for it. So, awesome. And also, thanks for having me, Mark. And Andrew, Scott, love you guys. Thanks for talking. And I do want to call out David Robert Mitchell, man. You made a great movie. And his cinematographer, Mike. I'm not sure how to pronounce the last name.
Giolakis.
Yeah, Giolakis.
Thank you.
I'll say Giolakis. I'm gonna assume it's with a soft G. I live in Florida. We have a heavy Greek population down here, and lots of soft G's.
It's a great film, and despite my criticisms, I tend to be a prick, especially when I'm sick. But see the film.
And last but surely not least, the lovely Andrew Shearer. Go ahead, sir. Where can they find your stuff?
Oh man, Mark has probably oversold my stuff a little. I mean, to me, because we can make movies now for relatively cheap. I'm more interested in just kind of breaking apart genre and subverting expectations, and also having a lot of cleavage and stuff like that. But
there's a place for cleavage.
Yeah, and I mean, it may be. We won't know now. I mean, the legacy of It Follows could be that it's the Napoleon Dynamite of horror. We just don't know yet. But I'm just saying, I really don't go to Amazon on Demand and look up the following titles expecting to see something like It Follows. But you will see something you've never seen before, I guarantee you. One of them is called Fake Blood. Another one is called Mondo Gonzo. Another one is called Pajama Nightmare. And the newest one is called The Underground Cinema with an S. And, it's different stuff you may like. I will enjoy if you just give me $2. $1 and some envelopes. $2.50 in a Jawbreak.
What was the third one, Andrew? What was that third one?
Pajama Nightmare.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Basically, if you liked the sounds, the sound of his alternate endings, you're gonna dig his stuff. You're gonna dig his stuff. Yeah.
Fair enough. That's close. Yes.
Well, the reason I give Andrew's examples is the fact I was stating the originality angle of it out of indie horror cinema.
Thanks, Patna.
You're welcome, and I know many folks that have also examples of that. No, they aren't necessarily to everyone's taste, but they are original. They are different. Indie films are why I enjoy them so much, is because I may not even care for the film so much, but the fact that you have someone attempting to do something original, something different, something out of the box office, is why I enjoy indie horror, and I think that's how you have to approach this, because you don't have to like everything, but you can appreciate everything.
Yeah, and what I make up for in lack of ability to write great scripts, I make up for it in cannibals that eat butts and gorillas wearing bikinis.
How did you pass that up?
Nice.
Hopefully not.
His movies are my speed. Yeah.
So check out the stuff. You can get the links for all these fine people, as well as anyone who's been in the Spoiler Room, on SpecialMarkProductions.com. That's where you can find Spoiler Room archives. You can find our interviews. We can find my stuff, my YouTube videos, my stuff I do for WeLiveFilm.com. SpecialMarkProductions.com is where you can find all of that lovely stuff. Please subscribe and like us and rate us on iTunes. It gets us noticed. Tell your friends. Have your friends tell their friends. Tell them about the Spoiler Room, the place where the conversation is fresh, though the films are definitely spoiled.